The broadcast is now starting. All attendees are in listen-only mode.
Yes, good morning, everyone. Welcome to this e-learning series, this webinar. A little bit of technical difficulties today. One of our panelists is on the road and has having a hard time connecting in, and she'll hop on whenever she can. So we can get this started. So this week we're talking about IT component hierarchy, basically talking about the systems and applications that make up that hierarchy. This is session number 4 of a series of webinars that we're putting together to talk about service-oriented IT and really the different components that make up the whole management of your IT environment. So the panelist, it's a panelist discussion. You know, it'll be open banter today. It'll be between Richard and myself, but normally Sue is here as well to hold, to hold a different point of view. As I mentioned, this week is about systems and applications. So let's just get started. Who's actually on the panel? There's myself. I'm Pierre Paquette. I'm the technical lead here at RAPA Consulting. My role with RAPA is more on the technical side, obviously with being a technical lead, but my background is 25 to 30 years. I always hate saying 30 years, but 25 years in the more technical side. I started out as a developer developing software applications, and I've been working in the IT field or the IT management field for the last maybe 17 to 20 years as a developer, as a consultant, as a system implementer, and touching on a lot of different aspects of managing IT and the information in IT. With us also is Richard Larocque. Richard?
Okay. Well, I'm Richard Larocque. I'm the IT service management lead with RAPA. So I have 25 years of business systems consulting. I've been doing a lot of work in IT service management, especially in the last 15 years or so, trying to help clients, implement the appropriate process and make the transition to being an IT service provider. So my role at RAPA is kind of the glue between the business and the technical side, so trying to make sure that the processes are in place, the service understanding is in place to ensure that we can have an IT service oriented organization.
Oh, thanks. And we also have Sue, who's now online. Sue, how about some credentials?
Hi, everybody. Can you hear me?
Yes, we can.
Oh, terrific. So this is the struggles of participating as a panelist from the road. So at least I got in, right? Okay, so go ahead.
No, maybe just we're at the point where we're just talking about our credentials and where we're coming from. So yeah, go ahead.
So my background, I'm the business lead at RAPA, and I really come from the perspective of making sure we help customers attain their business goals. So I kind of bridge the world between Pierre and Richard in identifying strategic objectives and then project management to make sure we get there. So my background, 20 plus years in enterprise software from the business development side as well as strategic planning. As well, right through to services in the service management space, heavily focused in the Microsoft area, but broader than that as well, and working with organizations from mid-sized enterprises right through to the largest global organizations, and that's my role.
Good. So,
yeah, so I can kick off this this next slide. So this is our 4th e-learning session in a series of 11 focused on service-oriented IT, and we've gone through the business value. Our second series looked at the first and second layers of the IT component hierarchy, which is really the clients and the business services. Last session we talked about organizational success factors in service-oriented IT. This week we're going back to the IT component hierarchy. If you can just do the next couple of builds there, Pierre. Where we're looking at, next one please as well. That's great. So we're looking at the third and fourth level of the IT component hierarchy, systems and applications. And Richard and Pierre, I'll turn this slide over to you.
Okay, well, I can jump in with kind of the definitions. So, systems and applications, there are two areas that are, often intertwined and ill-defined in organizations where, people use the two names interchangeably. When we talk about a system, from our perspective, it's a combination of, not only applications, but also hardware, software, technological software, and other service components that work together to achieve a set objective. Basically, a system is a logical grouping in itself. It's not something specific hard. An application, on the other hand, is one of many types of software that provides specific functionality to process information. So obviously, an application is an integral part of one or many IT services, and obviously applications can be custom built or commercially available.
Yeah, and these definitions basically come from several sources. When we talk about systems and applications, we're really setting up definitions so that we can create some levels of abstraction on the components that are in IT. A lot of the IT service management is done. We're defining services at a high level, and we know there's technology at a lower level, and there are some people who are taking those technology components and mapping them up to services directly. This is giving us the opportunity to actually create some levels of abstraction in that hierarchy, so that we can make we can distinguish between what a system is and what an application is, so that we can do other things to those entities. And I don't want to get into too much detail, but when we start talking about a system, we can start talking about that system or impact to a system, or the cost of a system, and also impacts to an application and the cost to an application. So from a management point of view, it really gives us those levels of abstraction that other more concrete objects will be able to be tied to, and then create that hierarchy, that whole, those levels that we talked about in the previous sessions, and getting a better, clear picture of what we have in IT.
So no, you go ahead, Richard. Thank you.
The thing that's important also, it's about the common language again. Often IT considers an application a system, whereas clients don't necessarily see it the same way. So we have to make sure that we both sides understand the same things, and so common language is an essential component of doing this. Go ahead, sir.
Okay, so that next build on the deck, Pierre, it's an important point, and this is flowing very well. Everything that Pierre described, the clients have no need to understand that level of detail. They're concerned about the services that they require to do their job and play their role, but the complexity of systems and how they're made up and the relationships to applications, and then later in our series we'll get into more detail below that level. They should not be exposed to that, nor do they need to understand how those things come together. So that's really the underlying theme of our session today, is that it's critical to manage those things and manage them well, and there is a direct relationship to customer experience, but insulating them from the complexities of that is key.
Yeah, and not only insulating the clients, because that's important from a client point of view. From in a service-oriented IT, you're really talking about what services the client consumes, and do they care if it's a system or an application? Then they shouldn't be. So no, but there is still that difficulty of relating technology to business. And again, these levels of abstraction will help us do that. So from a business point of view, when we're talking about setting a service up, we will often think about, okay, what systems and what applications do I need to provide that service? So from a business point of view, we're again not looking at the detail, the technology detail that sometimes has, there's a difficulty of making that relationship between business and operations. So again, it's a key piece.
And just to conclude, I mean, obviously, you know, these make up a service, but oftentimes in our IT's, you know, discussions with clients will be talking about systems and applications and not necessarily service. They'll say my, you know, HR application is not working, and so again, it's a question of making sure that we are all talking, you know, we understand each other. So because those names are part of the conversations all the time.
Yeah.
Right.
So systems and applications we'll see in a bit later in the following slides, but also in the next few weeks, is that systems and applications are configuration items that will end up in your CMDB along with your services and your clients and some of the other things that we'll talk about in future sessions. All right, so I think we can move on here.
Yep.
Let me build this one. How about we start? I'm just going to build them all to this point here.
Okay, so this slide is really, you know, just continuing where we started off on the last slide around the two perspectives from IT, and this is important as you're moving towards service-oriented IT. You're not losing the technology focus, you're just having the perspectives for the appropriate audiences. So at the top, you know, I'll just read it out. IT perspective is that as an IT professional, it's my job to ensure all components that any service relies upon are available, operable, aligned, and contain the right information. That's just fundamental. And so I don't know if anyone wants to talk about the particular graphic. I'm not sure that that's really that important, but the client perspective, understanding and trusting that when they view a service or offered a service, that it's delivered according to the needs and that it's available and dependable and all of the things around that. So the simplicity, as you can see, of the two, but of course the IT perspective is made up of those systems and applications, etc.
Pierre, me?
Yeah, you or me. I was just going to add, you know, we talked a little bit about this in the previous slide, but you know, where the systems and applications show up are in these other objects that make up the different databases of information that you have in IT. You know, we have things that are really low level, like assets and change and release records and problem records and so on. But we also have that abstraction of systems and applications. So you will have changes that are tied to systems and incidents that may be tied to applications. It just helps pinpoint maybe issues or areas of change or required change within the IT, from the IT perspective.
Yeah, the other thing I was going to mention in terms of simplicity, you can see the screen grab below from Numera Footprints. It's actually not their current product, I believe, but you can see that the services that they're offering are related to the things that somebody within an organization might do versus, again, the individual components. And that's really important. One of the things that we come across all the time is organizations that have internal IT service items, and we talked about this a little bit last week or the week before, and they're calling those services, but they're not. They're you know, the widgets or things that make up a particular thing that might be end user enablement. So, you know, I think it's important, and it's not. This is not rare. This move to service-oriented IT is an advanced capability. That's another message we should always repeat. But so if you do have things like you know, requesting a new device as a service right now, it's not that you're wrong, it's just that you may be at a lower level of maturity. So how do you plot a path towards not marketing the widget, but marketing end user enablement, or marketing you know, IT for finance and the systems underneath? It's not the systems that you're marketing, but it's the capabilities. I'll stop there.
Yeah, so when we're talking to client perspective here, you know, in the transition to IT, when you have services, IT services that are aligned to business functions, for example, you know, whether we call it IT, you know, IT for human resources, for example, within that service, you will have often the different systems that, you know, HR needs or wants to operate that service, and they will probably be listed in an SLA with specific understanding. So again, it's the link to, to between the service itself and the systems that make up that service. So the client would understand, to do HR, I need these systems, but they wouldn't go any further down. Technically, that's now part of more of the IT universe of, what applications work together to make up that system that, ultimately deliver that service. So in the client perspective, would go down and touch systems, but technically it should not go down much further than that.
Yeah, I was holding out on this last bill and you touched on that point with SLAs and service level agreements and operational level agreements and the OLAs. When we talked about services a couple of weeks ago, the relationship between the client and the service or the service provider is defined within the SLA. The levels of agreement on systems and applications would be tied back to an OLA, which is more from the IT perspective. Again, just showing that systems and applications are something that is used to define what IT has, not from a client's perspective to consume. So it's really important, and Sue mentioned it, Richard did as well, that your services are really just services. You shouldn't be calling out the technology. That technology really depends on how IT wants to fulfill that service.
Yeah, and again, it goes back to making sure that everyone has the same understanding of what is the service, what is the system, what is the application, and understanding those different layers. And we're all guilty, as much IT as the business, to either want to get too technical or want to abstract too much. So we need to find the right balance and the right words to explain what we wanted to talk about.
Right. Okay. Let's just move on to the next slide, and we can circle back on some of this, at the end as we're wrapping up.
So,
Richard, I think Richard would be a good one to walk through this again. And I think it's just breaking down the components of a service and what the components of systems and applications and the complexity, again, that whole discussion.
Yeah. So here again is an example. The overall gray box is what we could call the human resource service, or human resource IT, or something along those lines. It will vary, the name would vary, but the idea is this is a service the IT organization delivers to human resources to support their business. So, there may be a number of, service, components within it. There may be an HR system, HR training system. There may be some specific functional support, as you see in the example here. And so there may be a lot of things that are, service-based. Those rely on an overall system below, which is the HR system. That HR system, and that's the construct we've been talking about, is made up not only of a bunch of applications, but it also of other technology, CIs, documentation, and you could even add like service components there. If you're using a cloud service provider, for example, then it wouldn't be that you have the hard assets there, but you actually would have the contract to the cloud provider. So that's the system brings all of that together into one construct that is a key part of the service you deliver to the HR organization. And then there's the IT service capabilities on the right-hand side. These are the things you do to maintain that system, whether it's system development, support, technical support, and all of that. So all of this together constitutes the service. You can't parse it out. That's the service. And then these different pieces, they need to be managed from an IT perspective. You shouldn't have to be telling your clients that, oh, I'm having difficulty because this asset is this and that and stuff. You shouldn't go diving into that complexity. It should be transparent. Should be transparent to the user and the client.
Hey, Richard, can you just talk a little bit about the organizational structure behind applications and systems management? So what do the teams look like? So there's a lot going on here that's feeding up to support the service. what kinds of roles and responsibilities, and in an ideal situation have ownership over systems, ownership over the applications.
Yeah, and before you answer that, also it was something I wanted for us to discuss as well is, where is that information being stored and at what time and when is it being updated and whose responsibility is it to be updated? So I think we can touch on that at the same time.
Well, I mean, from an organization perspective, it varies a lot because basically it drills back to the capabilities on the right-hand side. Whereas some applications in some organizations, some applications have their own structure to manage. There's like a PeopleSoft group that does everything PeopleSoft, for example, while in other organizations it's more blended. But basically it's about having the application development life cycle covered organizationally, where you have people doing requirements gathering, you have people doing the development, maintenance, and the support. So it may be matrix, there may be different ways of looking at it, but in the end, those are the functions or the capabilities that you need to have to operate this. To go to Pierre's point, getting that information, storing it is usually in some form of an IT service management system, which would include a CMDB, and how you maintain it, that's where the processes come in. The processes are the glue kind of keeping all of this working together. Whereas, if we open a change, the change goes through this life cycle, and as it goes through the life cycle, updates need to be made to my information to reflect what's happening. So, yeah, I don't know if that covered your points, but my point of view for sure.
Yeah, it does, and it does open that it opens a conversation around who's actually collecting this information and where are you keeping it. Too often we're relying on discovery to discover all these low-end bits or these technical bits, and you may be mapping them back up to services. But from a change management and having different teams work on different areas of architecture, right, system architecture, it's important that the same language is used and the same understanding of what the relationships are between all these elements. Doing root cause analysis would be very difficult if you don't have this in between. If one application is being used by multiple systems, then you need to be aware of that, and it may not be as clear, or it might be very, very, very difficult to do, a lot more difficult to do if you're starting from the more technical bits and trying to work your way up to a system. So anyway.
Yeah, for sure.
Okay, great discussion, great points. I think that's our last slide for today. So on this particular topic, any closing thoughts in summary?
Well, I mean, yeah, my biggest thought, if we look at this slide here, right now we've actually shown just one system under an overall HR service. We have to understand that it may be actually more than one system that we provide to do this, and so this is a very simple view, but we have to make it clear that it gets a lot more complicated than this in reality. But certainly the relationship of service to system to applications is a key one to understand to be able to make the transition to a service-oriented organization.
Yeah,
right. And go ahead, Pierre.
I was going to say, and if there is complexity once you start mapping all this out, and we've lived this with several of our clients, is that if the complexity is there, it's time to look at why is it so complex, and does it need to be complex? If they're if things are complex, they become very difficult to manage, if not impossible. So looking at that relationship structure from service down to system to application is to really clearly see what IT does, and then look at other bits underneath, other CIs underneath, and if they are not mapped up to either a system or an application and ultimately up to a service, then you have to start asking the question, why am I doing these things if there are no impacted systems or applications?
Exactly.
That's a great point, and I think the last point I wanted to make is around the webinar series and our approach of looking at the entire not only the IT component hierarchy, of which this is the third and the fourth layer, but also looking at the other pieces of the IT business apparatus, if you want to look at it that way, that all these things are connected. And so, you know, when you're trying to plot out your system management strategy or your application management strategy, it's really important not to do it in isolation, and also not to do it only with the technology view, but to think about the business feeders and the business dependencies around all of these things as well. So holistic approach is always going to increase your rate of success.
Good point, for sure.
Okay.
All right, so we're coming up to the top of the hour. Do you want to summarize, Sue, and give a preview on what's coming?
Yeah, sure. If you just want to load the next two bills, I think we just summarized this discussion quite well. That was terrific. Our next session is May 12th. We will be hosting a session on financial management. So this is not capital financial management in terms of your GL, although that's a part of it, but IT financial management, much more complex, much more detail-oriented. So we'll be focusing on that session next week. If you have any feedback, you've got an email you can send to us, and we'd be happy to dig into more detail on other topics if you like. And I guess the other thing that isn't on here, in our next session and potentially prior to the next session, RAPA will be announcing a launch of a managed service called RAPA Insight that helps customers get a lot further down the path of bringing all of the pieces of IT together to make progress. So keep an eye on our website, rapaconsulting.com, and if you're on our mailing list, you'll find out more about that in between now and the 12th as well. But just wanted to plant that seed in everybody's ear.
Great.
Okay, great.
That's why you're the business lead.
Yeah, well, yeah, except I can't make our webinars on time. That's not very good, but I'll do my best next time.
Well, I don't know. Yeah, okay. I wasn't going to mention last week's.
Let's not go there.
Let's not just go there. Okay.
If anybody wants to watch last week's webinar, they can catch my blunder from last week as well. So,
Yeah.
Okay, have a great day, everybody. Thanks, guys.
Okay, thanks,
Bye-bye.
everyone.
You guys, bye.